that was a deep act of trust to say, I'm going to tell the full truth and I'm going to show you how I really feel. And you're not going to hate me or run away from me. You're going to listen and hold that. And I think to do that with God, to present who we are, not who we wish we could be, right, is the first step of building true faith and intimacy with God.
O God of my salvation, in the night I call out unto your presence.
Welcome to the Psalms for the Spirit podcast, and to this series of conversations I'm calling Something Psalmic. I'm your host, Kieran Young-Wimberly, an ordained minister and spiritual director, an American living on the north coast of Ireland. 15 years ago, I started working on a project called Celtic Psalms, and since then have arranged and recorded 44 psalms set to traditional Irish and Scottish melodies, along with my dear friends, the McGraths. And throughout the years, I've heard over and over again how the Psalms lift our spirits, how they help us find healing and hope when we really need it. I've also noticed that the themes and elements of the Psalms ripple out into so many aspects of our lives, and I've become curious about what in our lives is like a psalm, what brings us healing and hope in the midst of our days. So in this series, I've invited my guests to share with me something psalmic, something of or like a psalm that's helping them through right now. I hope this series inspires you to find something psalmic in your life too. And whatever it is that brought you here, I'm so glad you're with us.
My eyes grew dim with all of my sorrow. I lift my hands.
Hi, SueAnn.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. We are in the same time zone right now because I'm traveling in the States right now. And I'm so glad to be with you today. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today about something psalmic in your life. And the way I like to begin is, rather than me introducing you, because I'm sure I could do that, but I like to hear from you or from the people who come on to chat with me, because I think the way we describe ourselves, the way we wish to describe ourselves can be different than the way somebody else might describe us. So I would love to hear you describe yourself to the listeners. Maybe some of the listeners do know you personally, because some of the people who listen are people we know in our actual real lives. But then also there are people who may not know you. And so we'd love to hear you describe yourself. So if you could describe yourself in, any way you like, whether it be about your personal life or your professional life, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, well, I'd say that I'm a Christian. Yeah. And that is the biggest thing in my life that centers all the other things. And the roles that I take up, which are many, I do a lot of things. I always have a sense of how that connects to my sense of call of what it means to be faithful in following Jesus Christ. And so, some people might know me because I'm an artist and a musician and a filmmaker. Over the years, I've produced, a lot of other people's music, as well as I have an album, a solo artist album that I put out in 2018 called A Liturgy for the Perseverance of the Saints. I am working on another album, which we just did a song together recording at Corrymeela in Ireland.
That was so fun.
And then I also have, a documentary, a feature-length documentary film that came out in 2016 called Huan Dao. And some, I write columns for some places. I write a lot about culture, art, faith, these sorts of things. And, I'm also a pastor. So I'm in seminary right now at Princeton Theological Seminary. I'm wearing a hat from the Farminary, which, is a place that I work at school, working at the farm. And so I do a lot of farm work as well. I guess some people would call me a farmer. And I'm an activist and I do community organizing. I think the way that I understand my work as an organizer and as an activist is really as an extension of ministry. And But that's the thing, whether I'm talking about the music that I'm making or the podcasts that I edit or the music videos that I create, like I think of all of it as ministry because I have a very kind of like reformed understanding of vocation that whatever you do in your life, you can do it to the glory of God and to serve God's kingdom. So those are some things people might know me as. I do think that like, if you really want to just whittle it down, I would say that like, I'm a person of deep faith who thinks and feels deeply about everything in the world and tries to live with as much integrity and curiosity as she can and enthusiasm.
Wow. Yeah. Anything else? That's quite a lot.
I think that's good for now.
Yeah.
I try not to talk too long about the bio. It gets a little self-effacing.
Well, okay. So a Christian, a pastor, a student, a farmer, an activist, a musician, a producer, a person of deep faith. Those are all some of the things I heard. And yeah,
Reformed, and I would say specifically like very Presbyterian, very Reformed Christian too.
Yeah,
like
yeah. As far as your specific.
Yeah, I do think that like I found a tradition that means a lot to me. So it's a very integral part of how I've come to articulate my version of Christianity or my faith. Right.
Yeah.
And,
right.
So,
well, that's a lot rolled up into one person. And it's been so fun to get to know you since whenever we met. I guess we met at a conference a couple of years ago.
2 summers ago.
Yeah.
And then 2023 in Montreal. At the
Montreal Hymn Society conference.
Yeah.
And, and it was kind of like, oh, well, I hope we get to see each other again sometime. And then, we actually have ended up seeing each other
every year.
Like, at least once a year.
Because you're here a lot.
Yeah. So we're based in the States. When I go to the States, we're based in the same area. And then a couple of weeks ago, you came over to where I am in Northern Ireland at Corrymeela. So we've gotten to know each other quite a bit over the years. And I'm really, really glad for that because I just think you have such a great, perspective on life and faith and the world. And we also have a little commonality that we maybe discovered a bit more recently, which is an international background, because I grew up in Japan and Tokyo and spent some time in India as well. And you have that kind of cross-cultural background as well. Just say a tiny bit about that.
Yeah, my parents are from Taiwan and they immigrated to the United States in their 20s. My dad was in grad school here in the United States and, they ended up staying and having 3 kids and, all of that. But yeah, Taiwan is a huge part of my life, and my film Huan Dao, my documentary, is actually following me doing a 2-week bike trip around the whole island.
Wow.
And so it explores, it's structured as a travel documentary, right? You go from place to place, you learn a little about the history, you eat some really good food, you talk to some locals, but I'm also exploring some bigger questions about identity and belonging, what it means to be Taiwanese, what it means to be Taiwanese American or Asian American, and to try to find belonging in 2 different homes that sometimes don't recognize you as one of their own. And so that's a big part of it. I actually went back to Taiwan and I lived there for 4 years from 2018 to 2022. While I was there, I did a Master of Musicology at National Taiwan University. So I also consider myself an ethnomusicologist, because I do some of my culture writing, some of my research is around some of these topics, but yeah, more of a field ethnomusicologist, not an academic musicologist, though I do have training in it. So, but yeah, Taiwan, the former colony of Japan. Many similarities in terms of kind of this lifestyle, even I would say, because of, you have so many people on such small island and somehow we all figure out a way to function together and sort our recycling and our trash because there's so much sorting to do.
Are they very conscientious about their sorting?
Taiwan has the highest rate of recycling in the world.
Wow.
It has impressive. To, because you have 23 million people on an island that's like the size of New Jersey.
Oh my
and
goodness.
That's the thing is you have to consciously think about space and other people and limited resources. I mean, Taiwan is so small and it has the same population as Australia, right? Like, I mean, I was actually Googling this when I was in Ireland because I was trying to figure out what the population density of Ireland is, which is not very high. It's not a super populous place, right? Was it like 5-6 million?
Ireland's population. I would have to Google that, to be honest. So
okay,
she's gonna Google.
I'm Googling it, and it says the Republic is 5.38 million. I don't know what the population of Northern Ireland is combined with that, but I'm probably going to guess around 6 million is probably a good guess. And so Taiwan has basically almost 4 times as many people, and it's much smaller, like than Ireland in terms of like size of the island. Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they have a good process for sorting recycling because I'm sure they need it.
Yeah. And I mean, I was joking because I know in Japan they're also very finicky about the trash there too.
We were on recycling way before I think people in the States were, but then I haven't been there in a while, so I'm sure that things have even progressed a lot farther since then. So, but yeah, we had that in common, which is, that cross-cultural kind of, some people call it third culture, where it's, you live in 2 different cultures, but then you kind of embody a third culture, which is a mix of those. And, so I also now have Ireland in the mix, which is kind of weird because, I don't get to kind of talk about my Asian background that much but I did spend the first 20 years of my life basically based in Japan and India. So it's a huge part of my formative years. And so, yeah, it's always nice to meet somebody like you who also has that cross-cultural element. And, you have that background of also trying to find your place and, that sense of belonging in the world. In some ways you belong anywhere and everywhere, but you're also
but nowhere.
But perhaps nowhere.
But perhaps nowhere. and I do think that like when I think about how I became a Christian, because like I am a first generation Christian, my family is not Christian. Mm-hmm. It was actually through that sense of search for home and belonging that I found God. Mm. And I remember I was just reading through the Bible from start to finish when I was around like 12 or 13. And I got to the story of Exodus. And I remember it said that Moses named his son Gershom, which means a stranger there, for I was a stranger in a strange land. And I was like, that's how I feel. Yeah. And there's people like me in this book that feel that way. And also God is making a home for them. Yeah. Right. And I would say that is my story of how God called me. Mm-hmm. And also how I feel that I'm then called to do God's work in the world. Yeah. Yeah. Is to help people who don't know if they have a home, if they don't know if they belong anywhere, to know that they're loved and that God is calling them home. Yeah. And you're someone who can speak so particularly into that need that many people have for different reasons, wanting to know that they belong somewhere, not nowhere, but they do belong somewhere, and that maybe a faith community can be a place of belonging for people and belong to somebody. Right. And I think that's thing when you really think about what home means, sometimes it's a particular land in a particular place, but part of it is about belonging to different people or to God or to a community, right? That can even recognize or acknowledge you. And I think that is like the work of God, right? And I mean, we don't need to get too deep into this because this is super nerdy stuff, but I do think that like that's in some way what the covenant theology of the Reformed tradition is so compelling, because where they have this doctrine of adoption that says that these strangers will be made and adopted fully into our family with the full set of rights that are conferred even to biological children, right? So that meant a lot to you when you discovered that theology. Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like I have like these hilarious stories about reading Sinclair Ferguson's Children of the Living God, which is about the doctrine of adoption. Like I was an 18-year-old on the beach, and like that is the book that gave me courage to come out to myself. You know, like this is my freshman year of college, and that's when I got involved in Reformed University Fellowship and started attending a Presbyterian church. You know, I'm bisexual. I hadn't really consciously realized I was attracted to women. And then it started to kind of creep up more in my first year of college. But I really avoided that feeling because I knew that if I acknowledged it, that like the whole world would fall apart. Like everything in my life that mattered to me would be in jeopardy. So I just kind of like shoved it in the back and tried to ignore it. Like people always joke about like putting a pot in the back and then forgetting about it. But I couldn't forget about it. It was just there haunting me all the time. And I remember that summer I was at RUF Summer Conference, which is like a big national gathering for all the college students in this ministry. And I asked my pastor like for a recommendation at the book table, and he told me to read Children of the Living God by Sinclair Ferguson. And I'm reading this book, which is talking about how there's nothing I can do to lose the love of God, that I'm secure in my status, in my place in this family. And then, you know, I attended this workshop, which is about guilt, right? And how do we deal with the question of guilt in the Reformed tradition, especially with our concepts of grace and the law. And he said, like, you know, there's a lot of things that people feel guilty for that they don't need to feel guilty for. And there's also a lot of things we should feel guilty about, but we don't feel guilty about them. But the good news of the gospel is you're not saved by your guilt, right? Whether you feel guilty or not, God has covered you fully in this salvation. And so it gave me that courage and that freedom to say, okay, I'm feeling something that actually I do not know how to process, that feels like a threat to everything in my life, but I have the freedom to tell the truth and to lay it out. And I remember praying there on the beach, God, like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I've become someone that I've never imagined I could be. And I heard God say to me, but I've always known who you are, even if you didn't. And to me, that is the good news of the gospel. And I do think, like, you know, this is very similar to like the faith of the Psalms, which is to say, like, you know, there's no shoulds or oughts or in the Psalms. There is just what it is, what you feel, as scary and terrifying and perhaps heretical as it might be. You start from the place of telling the full truth. Yeah. And then trusting God will meet you in the place of that truth.
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that you found that book on the beach as an 18-year-old, did you say?
Yeah.
And that you, it gave you that message you needed to hear, which is that you had that freedom to tell the truth about who you were discovering yourself to be, and that God already actually knew who you were much better than you yourself, and that you were received into that unconditional love without question. And that sounds like it was a real turning point for you.
Yeah, I do think my life did change after that. It totally changed. And I could not have imagined all that would have changed, but I knew that there was nowhere I could follow God in that. And so that's been the hope of my heart it's been 15 years now. Yeah, 15 years. And so like that, well, we all have to find the courage to go into the unknown, whether that unknown is a foreign land or it's a foreign part of our own heart. Or another person's heart that we love, or a stranger's heart.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I like that way of thinking of it. Well, thank you, SueAnn. That was a wonderful introduction, a little glimpse into who you are, and thank you for sharing vulnerably about that too. Hi, listeners. It's Kieran here. Thank you so much for listening to Psalms for the Spirit, and I hope you're enjoying this series about what lifts our spirits and offers us healing and hope at this challenging time. This summer, I am inviting you to join me for something special. It's called Summer for the Spirit, a season to cultivate well-being in body, mind, and spirit through daily practices and through community. In a world where hard news keeps coming and we are feeling overwhelmed and anxious and depleted, we need practices that ground us, refresh us, give us courage to engage with hope and love and joy. If you're craving moments of peace and inspiration, and if you need sustenance for the journey, Summer for the Spirit just might be for you. Head over to KieranYoungWimberly.com/summer to find out more and download your free guide to 7 spiritual practices for well-being in uncertain times. Let's nurture our spirits this summer so that we can make a difference together.
My God, I'll give thanks evermore.
So you've already mentioned the Psalms, and my question is, what's psalmic in your life? And so what in your life today, these days, is bringing you that sense of healing? Maybe as you described, the way you connected with the Psalms there was about the freedom to tell the truth and how healing that can be. And then if there's something uplifting in your life that's giving you hope these days, it would be really great to hear about that from you.
I would say there's not a lot giving me hope right now, because I think when I look around at the state of the world, I feel very worried. I'm very concerned about a lot of things. And I also think that in the past, especially when I was a younger activist, and I hear this a lot from other activists that I work with, they will often say, what's giving me hope is the people I'm seeing gathered and organizing. And I have been doing this work long enough now that sometimes that actually doesn't give me hope, because I see how cruel people can be to each other, how self-righteous and inflexible and not willing to work with people who think differently than them. And, you don't accomplish anything in the world if you only work with people that you agree with, but I mean, I do think there's a connection between the grace that we give ourselves and the grace that we give other people, to have lots of thoughts, lots of feelings. Like sometimes people in their dating life will come to me for advice as like a pastor, and they'll say like, or their friend, and they'll say, why are they sending mixed signals? And I said, it's because they have mixed feelings.
Yeah, that makes sense.
People don't just feel one thing. They feel many things, right? And so then their actions reflect that. Right. And that's true. That's true in the Psalms. You see that in the turn and in the change in most Psalms, where there is sometimes despair, sometimes hope, sometimes rejoicing, and sometimes grieving, sometimes all in the same psalm, right? And I think that is a reflection of human experience, right? One of my favorite psalms is Psalm 88. And my friend Blake Mundell actually wrote a great song, like a kind of modern interpretation of it, that is not available anywhere anymore.
Oh no.
I have saved an MP3 of it, thankfully, on my computer that I do listen to still sometimes. But, the psalm is, and I wrote a paper actually on it for my Hebrew exegesis of the Psalms class last year. Most psalms of lament, they have a turn in it. And Psalm 88 is one that does not have a turn in it.
I know. It's the best. I wish there were more like that.
Yes. And, they say, my life, my soul has been rejected by God. And in that psalm, the psalmist blames God for all of their problems. And this song is not usually used often in congregational worship. Because I think that if people wrote a faithful, version of it, he will say, that's heretical. And you're like, yes, exactly. But, in the NIV, I believe, it ends with darkness is my closest friend. And I think I did my own translation of it for this exegesis course. And I'm pulling up my translation right now to see what I wrote. Your wrath cuts through me. Your terrors destroy me. Waters encircle me all day. Together they surround me. You've separated my loved ones and friends from me. Darkness is the one that knows me.
Darkness is the one that knows me.
Yes. Or darkness is my closest friend, or my darkness is my companion.
Yeah.
Those are some of the translations that are out there. And, the word darkness is there multiple times. Death, the grave, the pit, like being overwhelmed, overcome, surrounded, rejected. And I think this doesn't sound very hopeful on a surface level of like, what is bringing you peace or what is bringing you hope. But I think that this speaks more truthfully to my deeper understanding of what this faith really means, is that we have the courage to confess the scariest, most terrifying, most heretical things in our hearts. That is not too much for God. And actually that's sanctioned by the scripture that we shouldn't hold all those things. Like, it's one thing to not believe or feel those things. It's another to feel them, but pretend that you don't. And it takes a great faith in a relationship to bring forth those doubts. And, you know, I recently broke up with the person I was dating, and it was a overall good experience. But what was very fascinating is the conversation in which we decided to break up together. We were like, this is the most honest conversation we've had our entire relationship. Because we were basically able to say all the things that we were worried about, that we were like, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if we should be together, but I love you, but I'm not sure, you know, like, and all these other things. And that was just something that was a deep act of trust to say, I'm going to tell the full truth and I'm going to show you how I really feel. And you're not going to hate me or run away from me. You're going to listen and hold that. And I think to do that with God, to present who we are, not who we wish we could be. Yeah. Right. Is the first step of building true faith and intimacy with God. So I think that the hope is not so much that, you know, things are all going to be fine or they're going to be fixed to be better. But the hope is that we do not have to pretend that we are anything other than we are, that the world is not more broken, isn't as broken as it is, and that people are not despairing as much as they are. It is in that place, in the pit and in the darkness, we cannot run and hide from God. God will be there still. And I think that the world would be an emotionally and spiritually and intellectually healthier place if we could speak the truth about the world and ourselves as it is. Instead of how we wish it would be. Because we can't fix things if we can't even name the problem. But so much of the time we want to, like I did in my freshman year of college, compartmentalize something we don't want to deal with. That will then end up consuming us. But God says, bring it all to me, lay it all at the feet of Jesus, and God will redeem. Right? Even that which feels unredeemable.
So, I mean, the theme I'm hearing from you in a lot of different ways is that truth telling is really important. It's brought you healing in the past. It also is a way that you see hope in today's world, because, you know, it's so important to be able to say what's really going on and not be worried about the consequences of that. That actually the truth telling is what brings the healing.
You can
and
worry
hope.
about the consequences. Trust me, all truth tellers do. I mean, that's what keeps them from telling the truth, is that they're worried about the consequences, right? But you can do it in spite of it. Because I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being so compelled by a greater conviction, something, love, usually, that you will do something in spite of the fear, right? So. So courage to tell the truth, even if it is hard, even if it hurts, even if there is a consequence of it that is real and can be difficult to handle. But what's more important is that the truth comes out and that there is a way to have those difficult conversations. Yeah, you have to start there for sure, I think. And there's so much misinformation and like rapid growth of conspiratorial thinking in our day and age. And one thing that I realized was that I think people fall for lies because they lie to themselves. Like, we are being deceived by each other. Like, it's easier to be deceived by other people, to fall into these traps, because we're constantly deceiving ourselves because we're scared. People tell us what we want to hear. And then we believe it. And part of the discipline of being able to resist that is telling ourselves the truth that we don't want to know about ourselves. And I think death is actually one of the truths that people in the modern age really don't want to face. You know, it's been amazing that we have so many medical advances in the last, 50 years. People live so much longer than they used to. We know more about medicine and the body and science than we ever have before. We're fighting all these diseases that people used to die from. And yet we will never be able to stave off death. Even if we upload our consciousness to the cloud or whatever new thing is out there. And death is an integral part of life. And in denying death, we also deny life. That is the gospel of Christianity, that if Christ did not die and did not rise, then we're all doing this for nothing. So yeah, we have to tell the truth about death, about how death is real, but also not the end.
Right. Yeah.
Because sometimes like telling the truth feels like dying. And it's hard to imagine a world that lives after, you know, some great unveiling, revealing. But when it comes, you know, Sunday always comes. And whether it's in this life or in the final resurrection, I do believe that death will not have the final word. But it's an important chapter in all of our stories that even God himself did not avoid. He could have, as it says in Philippians, you know, but like he didn't. And that, I think it was Gregory of Nazianzus, or I don't know how to pronounce that. It's like that which was not assumed was not redeemed. And so all of this, all of humanity, all of suffering and pain and death and joy and family and life was assumed. And so it was then also redeemed.
So ultimately, I mean, you started by saying there's not a lot that gives you hope right now. Maybe in the people
not
around.
In an earthly way. Yeah. Not in an earthly way.
There is that kind of richer, deeper theological message that does ring true for you, that you hold on to that idea that everything will be redeemed, even if we don't necessarily see it in this lifetime.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's some theories because the Psalms are in the Old Testament, so they don't talk about Jesus in them. I mean, but most of the prophecies that we attribute to Jesus fulfilling in the New Testament are from the Psalms, right? And my professor, Mark Smith, who taught my exegesis of the Psalms course, he left this lecture for the last day because it's a New Testament question for the Psalms.
Okay.
And he said, I think that the early Christians, the disciples, were so confused about what happened because Jesus did not fulfill the role of the Messiah as Jewish followers expected that he would. And they were so confused by that. But they had experienced the resurrected Christ that they were scrambling, trying to figure out how do we make the math in terms of their understanding of theology. Of course, how they then worked those out became the foundations of the New Testament. And much of that is in the Psalms, right? And he said that the heart of the gospel, right? The heart of the Christian faith is the Psalms. And so this is an interesting, as an aside, obviously, like Calvin really believed in singing the Psalms. But then the thing is that Jesus is not mentioned in there. But, you know, we as creative hymn writers and psalmists sometimes adapt Christ into them as Christians, or we can see the prophecy or the foretelling of Christ. Psalm 88, right? With darkness is my closest companion. Darkness is the one that knows me. There are many theories that this is the psalm that Jesus was really thinking of, like as he was on the cross. And so that can bring us back to that question of that which was assumed was redeemed, because even, again, our most darkest thoughts, even our deepest sense of abandonment and death and pain and overwhelm have been assumed by Jesus Christ willingly and so redeemed.
Wow. Well, I hadn't thought of that question of whether the psalm that Jesus may have been thinking of on the cross. Anyway, probably he had lots of psalms on his mind. I think
psalms,
Jesus knew the psalms very well, because that would have been the tradition of his community. And so there were words quoted from Psalm 22, but also, I think he would have known Psalm 88, and that would have been, in that strange kind of way, a source of hope for him, even as it was accompanying him in that very dark time, you know, where maybe he was grasping for those words of hope from his own tradition. And so it's interesting to think of Psalm 88 being something that would have spoken into that experience of his on the cross. Yeah. Well, thank you for reminding us of the hopeful words of the least hopeful psalm, because that is the way a lot of people experience it.
I also wish more people, I wish we had the boldness, the faith the courage to sing Psalm 88 in congregational worship.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully as a pastor, I will do that, but like in the average church service, you know, whatever their denominational theological orientation, it's very rare to meet a Psalm 88 in congregational worship.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it is. Well, thank you so much, SueAnn. This has been so rich and I think deeply hopeful in that truly honest way of stating what isn't hopeful and then sort of walking through that and then finding the hope on the other end, you know. So thank you for helping us to do that and encouraging people to be courageous, which doesn't mean fearless, but it means working through that fear in order to express truths that are difficult to say, but then that somehow do bring us to that point of healing and hope on the other side. So as we close right now, is there any word or phrase that comes to you right now that you'd like to leave people with?
I was just looking at the translation that I wrote of Psalm 88, and one of the last things I kind of wrote in my paper was about how the first line of Psalm 88 says, God of my salvation. Mm-hmm. A statement that will be challenged by every following line of the psalm. So the heart of this work is questioning, is that true? Is that promise real? Yeah. But the fact that the psalmist dares to ask it shows that there's still hope for those words to be true, even if their circumstances continue to beg the question, is this a God of my salvation or my destruction? And I think so we can do God of my salvation ?
Yeah. I know some other people that I've spoken with a while ago about Psalms, a few of them mentioned actually Psalm 88, and there was that one kind of glimpse of hope in that there's a relationship there, that there's a speaking to God, you know, directly, as you're also sharing all these difficultly honest lines and expressions. So yeah, God of my salvation ? So thank you so much, SueAnn, for chatting with me today about your life, your background, who you are, a little bit of who you are, and then also walking us through what's bringing you healing and hope this season, even if it is hard to see that hope sometimes.
Yeah, and if there's a version, if people want to hear, Sandra McCracken has a version called 88. It's spelled out, and it's in her album In Feast or Fallow.
Cool. That's great.
So it's very sparse, but I do like that adaptation if people want to go check it out.
Good. And I also, we have done a Psalm 88 as well. So I'll put that at the end of this podcast. But if people want to look up Sandra McCracken's, that would be great too. Because the more Psalm 88s out there, the better. And you should write one too, if you haven't yet.
I'll work on that one.
Okay, work on that one. All right. Thanks, SueAnn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.
Do you shine out into the darkness, into a land where no light can be seen at all? O God of my salvation, each day and night I call out unto your presence. Let my prayer come before you and hear my cry.
You've been listening to Psalms for the Spirit with me, Kieran Young Wimberly, with music by Celtic Psalms. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would leave a 5-star review so that others can more easily find it. And if you know someone who might be inspired by this podcast, please do pass it on. And finally, make sure you sign up for my podcast email list so you never miss another episode. Until next time, may our spirits find healing and hope in the days ahead.